So we're the first ones to start the cardiac, right? We've not yet started in anatomy and histology. And naka-start nung sa anatomy. Histology, not yet. So we've had a little bit of anatomy. So this week we'll start the cardiovascular physiology. Then we have 4 weeks. If you have looked at your books in physio, in your textbook, right one, it's a lot. Have you seen it? How many pages? Kasi naghan kayo siya. In 1 week, there's like 100 pages. Okay, so, but for now, there's just 2 chapters. That's why we have to spread it out to 4 weeks instead of the 3 weeks. We cannot, there's a lot to cover. And then you'll have a special lecture with our cardiologist, Dr. Caballero, on October. Mark your calendars. October 11 at 1 to 3 p.m. The topic on ECG. Okay, the basics of ECG reading. So Dr. Caballero will give you that lecture Friday afternoon. Okay? That's the last week. October 11 at 1 to 3 p.m. How was your respite block exam? Okay lang. Sige. We'll see your... I haven't seen your scores yet, so I'm asking Mama Rita. Next week we will try to collate your scores on the first 2 blocks. So you will know where you stand and you will know what you need to do, any improvements you want to do so that you can get better scores. Okay, so you will pass first year. So before we start our lecture proper, I'm asking everyone to please take a moment of silence as I pray. Let's pray. Dear Father, Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day where you have gathered us here to learn of this physiology of the human body. We thank you for these students who are here, eager to learn. May you enlighten them. Give us a receptive mind for everything we're about to learn today. May this be useful in their future endeavors as medical doctors someday. Thank you, Lord, for hearing us in our prayer. We ask all these things in Jesus' name. Pray, amen. Okay, so cardiac muscle. The first chapter is cardiac muscle, the heart as a pump and function of the heart valves. That's what we'll cover today. And the second topic is the rhythmicity of the heart. Okay, so we'll cover 2 chapters for today. So, so from the term cardiovascular system, we have cardio and vascular. Okay, cardio and vascular. For today, we will discuss cardio. Then the rest is vascular, the vascular part. Okay, so cardio from the word cardiac or heart, and vascular from vasculum or little vessel or vessels. So the heart is in simplest terms, the cardiovascular system in simplest terms is a series of tubes, that's the blood vessels, filled with fluid, that's the blood, and connected to a pump, that's the heart. So the heart is the pump, it pumps the blood into the body. Okay, and you've learned in the last time in your respiratory system, it goes to the blood goes to the lungs to get oxygen, to pick up oxygen before it goes to the rest of the body to distribute the oxygen for all the tissues of the body. So that's the cardiovascular system. These are our learning objectives for this topic. Differentiate cardiac muscle from skeletal muscle in terms of histology, action potentials, execution, contraction, coupling. Understand the pressure, volume, flow changes that occur during the cardiac cycle, work output of the heart, volume pressure diagram, and the cardiac cycle events that accompany it. and apply the concepts of preload, afterload to the contraction of the heart, regulation of the heart pumping mechanism with the Frank-Starling mechanism and the ANS, and effects of ions and temperature on heart function. Okay, so that's the flow of our discussion proper this morning. So, anatomy of the heart. We will review anatomy and histology of the heart, action potentials, cardiac cycle or output, preload, afterload, and heart pumping. So, anatomy. So, you've learned this in anatomy na? The parts of the heart? You did? Yes? There are how many chambers? 4 chambers. We have the left and right atrium and the left and right ventricles. It's divided into, the heart is divided into 2 by 2 halves by the septum, the atrial and ventricular septum. So the left side of the heart pumps blood into the rest of the body, the systemic circulation. The right side of the heart pumps the blood into the lungs, the pulmonary, through the pulmonary circulation. Okay, so we have atria here on top and ventricles here in the bottom. So, okay. How about the flow of the blood flow through the heart and into the systemic circulation? Can somebody tell me the flow of the blood from the vena cava through the heart to the lungs to the systemic circulation? Anybody? Huh? Yes? What's your name?
To the right ventricle. After, the blood will pass through the pulmonary valve into the pulmonary artery and into the lungs. Then it will get carbon dioxide, goes back to the pulmonary veins and into the left atrium. And it will pass through the mitral valve and into the left ventricle. Then we'll go to the aortic valve and into the aorta and to the system by system.
Very good, thank you. So, I'm sure you're familiar with it now. So, blood from the tissues flows into the veins from the upper side of the body to the superior vena cava, the lower side to the inferior vena cava. It goes to the left atrium and passing through tricuspid valve, which is what kind of valve? Semilunar or AV? AV valve. Okay, AV valve. And then from the right ventricle into the pulmonary trunk through the pulmonic valve, which is a semilunar valve. Okay, so and it goes to the lungs, gets oxygenated, and passes through the 4 pulmonary veins into the right atrium, left atrium, passing through the mitral valve and into the left ventricle, and pump out into the aorta through the aortic valve and to the rest of the systemic circulation. And then it gives off oxygen, all its nutrients, and picks up the waste products and goes back. Okay? So that's the normal flow of the heart, blood into the heart and the systemic circulation. So the cardiac output from the left side of the heart equals the cardiac output on the right side. Okay, normally, physiologically. Okay, so how about in histology? There are 3 types of cardiac muscle. We have muscle in the atrium and the ventricles, and then a specialized type of muscle fibers which can cause excitation by itself and conduct electrical activity. Okay, so you call this specialized excitatory conductive muscle fibers. Okay, so what are the similarities of the cardiac muscle to skeletal muscle? Striated. What else? Alright. What's special about this is lattice work, arrangement. What else? They have a lot of gap junctions, which allows for easy conduction of ions through their membranes. Okay. What else? Intercalated discs. They also have actin and myosin. Okay, how about the action potentials? Action potentials in cardiac muscle are similar to that in skeletal muscle. We will learn more of action potentials in the neuromusculoskeletal system. But for today's discussion, action potentials are changes in the membrane negativity, electronegativity in a cell or a fiber. For example, if you have one cell, you have a cell. Inside the cell, it's usually negatively charged. Okay, for all cells at rest. But when there is a channel that opens, an ion channel that opens, for example, a sodium ion channel that opens, it allows passage of sodium ions inside. So, sodium is a cation or an anion? Cation, it's a positive ion. It brings with it its positive charge, bringing the electronegativity of the inside of the cell into a more positive state. Okay, so that change from negative to positive become a potential for an action. Okay, for example, for that cell, if that's a muscle fiber, that cell can now contract. Okay, contraction and function. The function of a muscle fiber is for contraction, right? So that fiber is now ready to contract. Okay, so that's an action potential, a change in the membrane potential inside the cell. So this is what happens before a cardiac muscle contracts. Diba, our heart is a pump, so it contracts. Before it contracts, there's a change in the membrane potential. We call action potentials. So then from the negative, this is a muscle fiber in the ventricle. This one is a Purkinje fiber, basically same. From the difference is the resting membrane potential. The resting membrane potential of negative 85. So during depolarization or entry of sodium ions inside, it rises up to 20. In the skeletal muscle, it goes down because potassium, which is also a positive ion, goes out, bringing with it its positivity outside. So negative is left inside. So it goes back to negative again. Okay? So it goes down very fast. But in cardiac muscle, there is what we call a plateau. That's what differs it from the skeletal muscle. Okay, there's a plateau. After depolarization, there's a plateau right before it goes down. Meaning it contracts before it relaxes, mas taas-taas. It's a longer duration of contraction than the skeletal muscle. Okay, so what causes this plateau? Okay, there are the same fast sodium channels that are present in skeletal muscle, but there's also these L-type slow calcium channels, also called calcium sodium channels, which are slower to open and they remain open longer. So they cause that plateau. So you have, aside from the fast sodium channels, you have the slow calcium channels. Okay, and another thing that causes the long action potential is there is a decreased potassium permeability. Okay, so potassium doesn't go out as fast as the skeletal muscle, so mas slow siya go out. Okay, because of the decreased permeability to potassium. Okay, that's the reasons for the long plateau. For the plateau seen in the cardiac muscle action potential. So this is the cardiac muscle action potential has 4 phases. Okay, so this is also a question in the exam. We have phase 0, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. So phase 4, it starts with phase 4. Phase 0 here is the depolarization where the fast sodium channels open. Phase 1 is the initial repolarization where the fast channels start to close, but there is potassium efflux, so then it goes down a little bit. Plateau is when the calcium channels open, as we said earlier, the fast channels would close, and there is decreasing efflux of potassium. Increased calcium efflux because of these calcium channels. So that's phase 2. The plateau is the phase 2. Plateau, phase 2. Phase 3, repolarization, where the calcium channels close and the potassium channels will now open, allowing potassium efflux. Then lastly, phase 4 is the resting membrane potential. Okay, RMP. Okay? So far, so good? Yes. Now, how fast do these muscles conduct these signals, these action potentials? For the atrium and ventricles, that's 0.3 to 0.5, so half meter a second. So if this is half a meter in 1 second. 1 second. But the specialized conductive system is 4 meters per second. That's very fast. So times in 1 second. Very fast conduction. That's what we see in the Purkinje fibers. Very fast conduction compared to the atrial and ventricular muscle. Also in the muscle, they have, we'll study more of this in skeletal muscle, this refractory period, wherein that period during the action potential where another stimulus cannot elicit an action potential. Okay, another contraction. So refractory. No, even if there's a stimulus that occurs during this time, it cannot elicit an action potential. We call that the refractory period. So for the ventricle, it's 0.25 and 0.30 of a second. For the atria, it's 0.15. And we have this relative refractory period, very, very short, 0.05 of a second, wherein a greater than usual stimulus can elicit an action potential. So clinically, we see this later on in patients of premature ventricular contraction, premature atrial contraction. During the relative refractory period, there's a stimulus causing the abnormal heartbeat, the beat to be earlier than usual, earlier than the regular heartbeat. Okay? So that's the relative refractory period. For this, I'm not going to discuss this now because it's a bit complicated. We'll discuss it in neuromusculoskeletal system. Anyway, I will be the one to discuss the excitation, contraction, coupling, relaxation in skeletal muscle. But there are also differences with the skeletal and the cardiac muscle. Okay. So that's the introduction. Just to review the anatomy, histology, blood flow of the heart, histology, action potential, differences, and velocity. Let's go to the heart part. I have a question. Why does blood flow in physiologic or in physiology, physics term? Why does blood flow, or for any fluid for that matter, why does it flow? For example, you have water. Why does water flow?
Pressure difference.
Yes, pressure difference. How? Okay. Physiologically speaking, blood flows or any fluid flows because there is a pressure gradient, a difference in pressure. For example, if you have water just in the bottle, it's not flowing. There's no difference in pressure in 2 points, right? But if you have water in a stream, For example, in the mountain, it goes down. Because of gravity, the pull of gravity, it flows down, right? If you pour water out, it flows down, doesn't go out because of the pull of gravity. There's a difference in force, okay? Difference in pressure. In the heart also, if the body, if the heart is not pumping, there's no force that generates enough pressure to push the blood to the different parts of the body, systemic circulation. So it's the heart that produces the pressure difference to the different parts of the body. If the heart stops, then blood flow stops, right? Okay, so the heart has to continue pumping even when we're asleep, all day, every second of every day. Okay, so that's the workhorse of the human body. And we will learn later on that even if you take the heart out, I saw in one movie, Indiana Jones movie where they had to offer sacrifice, they took the heart out. The heart is still pumping, a few seconds, minutes after it was taken out. Okay? It doesn't need the brain to tell it to pump. It has its own intrinsic ability to let it pump by itself. Okay? So this is that. They said that from that movie was actually based on reviews on pagan traditions, which they did, and they noticed that the heart still pumps even after it's taken out of the human body. Okay, so that's how amazing the heart is. So, as blood flows through the heart, it goes through different pressure changes, volume changes. That's what we will discuss next, the cardiac cycle. Okay? These are events that occur from the beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next. So one heartbeat, contract, relax, that's one cardiac cycle. Contract, relax, that's another cardiac cycle. Okay, this is initiated by spontaneous generation of an action potential in the sinus node. So it's spontaneous, spontaneous, doesn't need you don't need to tell your heart beat, stop beating. You can't do that. It consists of a period of relaxation called diastole, which the heart fills with blood. Okay, remember diastole is when the heart relaxes and it fills with blood. The heart, although it is an organ that supplies blood to the rest of the body, also needs its own supply, blood supply. During diastole, that's when it gets its own blood supply. Okay, it also needs oxygen, right? So diastole, it fills with blood. And then systole is the period of contraction. So the total duration of a cardiac cycle is reciprocal of the heart rate. Meaning, if you're exercising, for example, the heart rate is increased, the cardiac cycle is decreased. Diba? If it's like this lang, its cardiac cycle is longer, but if it's pumping like that, so the cardiac cycle is decreased, right? So it's inversely proportional, okay? It's reciprocal of the heart rate. Especially the diastole. Diastole is decreased, most especially during an increase in heart rate. So, okay, here comes the busy slide. So, I want you to master this because, yeah. This is where most of the questions come out. Cardiac cycle, very important. You should understand this. This will tell you, this slide will tell you a lot of things by just mastering this. Okay, so let's try to decipher this one by one at a time. Okay. Where do we begin? So okay, let's define first these curves. So you have this, in studying, if you've noticed in studying physiology, you don't get to see, unlike in anatomy, you get to see pictures, structures. In physiology, you have function, you cannot see it in pictures. So we have graphs. So in graphs, in studying graphs, you look at the x and y axis. What's in the x-axis? So this is time. Over time, this is what happens. And what's in the y-axis is what corresponds during that time. Okay? So that's how we study physiology. Okay, let's take a look first at the curves, different curves. You have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 curves, and we have this ECG and phonocardiogram. We have the aortic pressure curve, which is the pressure in this dashed line, the top. The pressure in the aorta. So imagine the aorta. Okay, so that's here. Here, no? Here. The one curving. As it receives the ventricle, the volume of blood from the ventricles. Okay, so that's the pressure in the aorta. These are the changes in pressure of the aorta during the cardiac cycle. And then we have the atrial pressure curve, which is this dashed line here, the second dashed line. Okay, see that? And then we have these are the changes in the pressure in the atrium. So this is taken from the left side of the heart, but the right side of the heart has similar, it looks the same but has different values now. Okay, because it's the right side of the heart has to push against a much smaller circulation, the pulmonary circulation, so it has to generate a much smaller pressure than the left side of the heart. But the left side of the heart has to push against the whole body, so it has to generate a lot of pressure. Okay, so the right side is just smaller pressure, but the same volume, right? Because cardiac output is the same for right side and left side. Okay, so this is for the left side of the heart. So this is the pressure of the left atrium during the different phases of the cardiac cycle. Then we have the red curve, which is the pressure in the ventricles. Okay, so ventricular pressure during the cardiac cycle. And then the blue one is the volume of blood in the ventricle, or the changes in volume of blood during the phases of the cardiac cycle. Okay, and then we have the ECG and the phonocardiogram, or what you hear when you listen to the heart sounds, lub-dub, the heart sound, lub-dub. Okay, so where do we begin? Let's look at what's easy? ECG. ECG is, you'll have more of this the fourth week. We have PQRST. P is atrial depolarization. Suffice to know that P is atrial depolarization. That's when the atrial muscle starts to have a change in action potential, leading to, of course, atrial contraction. The polarization precedes contraction. Then QRS is ventricular depolarization. Okay, these are changes in the electrical activity in the heart. It will look like this. That signifies there's a change in electrical conductivity in the ventricles. QRS is ventricular depolarization, and T wave is ventricular repolarization, or when it begins to relax, the signal for it to relax. Okay, so atrial depolarization, QRS, ventricular depolarization, ventricular repolarization. So if you notice here, P, this is during diastole. Okay, this is when the atrium receives the signal to contract, right? Atrial depolarization. So it is followed by atrial contraction. So you see in the atrial pressure curve, there is an increase in pressure. Okay? Atrial pressure curve is an increase in pressure after atrial depolarization. So may contract naman siya, so there's increase in pressure. Okay? So we call this atrial, the letter A here. In the atrial pressure curve, we have three curves, A, C, and V. A is atrial contraction. Atrial contraction. Okay? And then after that, after it contracts, the atria is a primer pump. When we say primer pump, diba, during when the ventricles relax, blood you said earlier, the blood flows into the ventricles, the valves open, the AV valves open, allows blood to flow by gravity, okay? But the atria also contracts at the end of the diastole. We call the atrial kick to add an additional 50 to 20%. We call it the atrial kick of volume into the left ventricle. Okay? Additional 50 to 20% of volume of blood into the left ventricle before the ventricle can push that blood out into the systemic circulation. Okay? So that's the atrial kick. Okay? Atrial contraction. And then we have the C wave. This is ventricular contraction. This is because in the atrium here, when the ventricles contract, what do you call this? Mitral valve closes, ventricles contract. It produces like a backward pressure in the atrium, producing this pressure wave of C, ventricular contraction. That's why you have that C. Okay, this is ventricular contraction. And then after the ventricles contract, volume is the blood is exerted out into the aorta. Then it begins to fill with blood. So we call this V wave, as it fills up, increasing pressure, venous feeding. Okay? ACV, atrial contraction, ventricular contraction, venous feeding. You get it so far? Okay, these are changes in the atrium. Okay. What about in the ventricles during the cardiac cycle? Okay, so as blood begins to fill up in the diastole, there's no change in pressure. And then during the atrial kick, okay, there's an increase in volume of blood and then increase in a little bit of pressure. And then after that, you see this area here where there's an increase in pressure, sudden increase in pressure. That's when the ventricles start to contract, systole. Okay, increase in pressure, it contracts, blood is extruded out. So if you look at this with a volume, okay, as blood is filling, the volume is increasing. Then there's the atrial kick, the volume also increased. And then as the pressure goes up, it extrudes blood out, so volume goes down. Correct? Okay? So until here, back to the cycle. But you notice, there's small phases here. Okay, so this one is the same as this. Isovolumic contraction. Sige, I'll catch my for you to catch also. Isovolumic contraction. Look at the term. Isovolumic and then contraction. Iso meaning, what's iso? Same. Isometric, same length. Isovolumic, same volume. So same volume, there is contraction, but the volume is the same. The ventricles are contracting. Notice this, there's increase in pressure, but the volume doesn't change. Look, the volume doesn't change. Why is that so? Why do you think? It contracted, but there's no change in volume. This is a very small amount of time here. It's because when you see isovolumic contraction or isovolumic relaxation, it's like iso, if there's iso, the valves are closed. It hasn't opened yet. So there's increase in pressure, but valves are closed, volume can go out. So pressure increases, pressure builds up, but no blood is not going anywhere. It's just staying in the ventricles. So that's a very short period, isovolumic contraction. Sudden increase in pressure, no change in volume. Okay, all valves are closed. What are the functions of the valves? Prevent backflow, right? Okay, they're like doors. When they open, they allow the blood to come in. Because they open when there is a change in pressure, difference in pressure in both chambers. But when the ventricles contract, they close to prevent backflow. Okay, so during this time, all valves are closed. So the pressure increases, no change in volume. Okay? Sige. What else? Then we have the aortic pressure. Okay, the pressure in the aorta. Sige, as blood is filling up in the ventricles, okay, the pressure is going down in the aorta. There's not much going on there. Pressure is decreasing. Blood is flowing out into the systemic circulation. And then during, when the valve opens at the end of isovolemic contraction, the aortic valve opens, blood is gushing out, so the aortic pressure also increases. Correct? Together with, if you notice the curve, it has the same curve, same level of pressure. So the pressure in the ventricles is reflected into the aorta. So when the pressure reaches 80 mmHg, okay, and it exceeds the 80 mmHg, it flips open the valve and blood is allowed to get out. Okay, and it reaches up to 120 mmHg pressure at the top, at the tip, at the peak of ventricular contraction. Okay. And then we have this small notch here in the isovolemic relaxation. That's when the aortic valve closes. So when the pressure goes down, okay, aortic valve closes, producing this incisura. We sometimes call incisura or necrotic notch. That's because the pressure, the aortic valve closes. So there's that small dip in the pressure. So that's incisura or necrotic notch. The reason for that is aortic valve closure. Okay, so far so good? Yeah. So, that's it. The phonocardiogram is the sounds produced by the closure of the valves. When the valves close, they produce that lub-dub sound. So that's what we hear in the phonocardiogram. Okay, so as we move on, do you have any questions so far? Okay. We have terms to remember. We have the end diastolic volume. So look at the term, end diastole. So at the end of diastole, so remember diastole is relaxation. So it's relaxed. So blood is filling in. So the volume is the maximum volume of blood the left ventricle can accommodate before contraction. Okay? So that's around, how much can it? 120, I think. It's there in your book. That's end diastolic volume. Then the stroke volume is the volume of blood that is pumped out with each heartbeat, with each systole. Okay, that's stroke volume. So it's not the same as end diastolic volume because not all of the blood is pumped out. Remember, your heart needs the blood also. What's left inside has to go to the heart also, to be for the heart's purposes of oxygen and nutrients. The stroke volume, that's around 70 ml only. So what's left behind is the end systolic volume. At the end of systole, what's left behind is the end systolic volume, which is around, if it is 120 minus 50 ml, around 50 ml. And we call that percentage of blood that is ejected out as ejection fraction. That's around 60%, 55 to 60%, the normal ejection fraction of blood. So not all the blood it receives in the ventricles can be exerted out. Only 60%, the remaining 40% remains in the ventricles. Okay? So we call that the end systolic volume, the end of systole. In the cardiac output, it's stroke volume pumped in 1 minute. So that's one heart rate, in 1 minute, the heart rate. Stroke volume times heart rate, that's the cardiac output. The volume of blood ejected out in 1 minute by the heart. Okay? So remember these terms. Okay? So as you said, the valves are their function is to prevent backflow. You have that in your anatomy? Okay, dito kong balik anak. Okay, Nani? Is this okay? Yeah, so far? No questions? Okay, example later, ha? So, this is the cardiac cycle. You have to review this, okay? So, I hope I have guided you. If you have questions, you can ask now, before we move on. Okay, so these are the changes of the different parts of the heart in terms of pressure and volume during one cycle, cardiac cycle, systole and diastole. Okay, so it's in your book. You can review it in your book. Okay, so far so good. Let's move on, shall we? Okay, work output of the heart. As I've said, the heart is something that is very hard-working. The stroke work output of the heart is the amount of energy that the heart converts to work during each heartbeat while pumping blood into the arteries. In 1 minute, we call that 1 minute work output. That's stroke work output times the heart rate. It's in two forms: the volume pressure work, or the external work. That's the work that's the heart produces for blood to flow into the different chambers of the heart. And the kinetic energy of blood flow component. Most of the work is in the external work. Okay, we can see that here in the volume pressure curve and volume pressure diagram. So you see here, the curve is volume against pressure. So you have the volume here, the left ventricles, and the pressure, the changes in pressure with each change in volume. We have the volume pressure curve and the volume pressure diagram. Let's take a closer look at this. It has 4 periods. Okay, it's just like the cardiac cycle, same principles of the cardiac cycle, but expressed in this. So first period is from, we have A, B, C, D. So the period that's first here is A to B. Okay, the period of filling. Okay, during the period of filling, the volume is 50 ml. Okay, that's the end systolic volume. What remains after systole? Okay, so the least volume, the main volume. Okay, the pressure here is 2 to 3 mmHg, so pressure is low. So during the period of filling, there's it's the same pressure, but volume is increasing, and then a slight increase in pressure. At the end, there's an increase in pressure of 5 to 7 mmHg, and the volume this time is 120 ml. That's the end diastolic volume, right? Okay, at the end of diastole. Next, let's go to the next period. Okay, B to C, phase 2. This is the period of isovolumic contraction. As you said, isovolumic means same volume, so there's no change in volume, 120 ml. And what happens to the valves? Valves are closed, so there's no movement of blood anywhere. So the volume remains the same. But the pressure from 5 to 7 mmHg, it has increased. Okay, so the pressure 80 has reached 80 mmHg, at which we said aortic valve opens. When it reaches 80, the same pressure with the aorta, and then if it exceeds that, it opens the valve because there's a change in pressure. So aortic valve opens, allows flow of blood out, which will now go to the next period, C to D. So the volume is going down in the ventricles because this is the period of ejection. Okay, from 120 ml, it has now go back to 50. Okay, stroke volume minus the stroke, and diastolic volume minus the stroke volume is and systolic volume of 50. The pressure reaches up as high as to 120 mmHg, okay, before it goes down. And then goes to the 4th phase, period of isovolumic relaxation. Same volume, but the ventricles this time are relaxed. So what would we expect of the pressure? Decrease also, okay, relaxation. Same volume, but the ventricles are relaxing, so the pressure is decreased. Okay, so that's the period of isovolumic relaxation. So 4 periods, remember, period of filling, isovolumic contraction, period of ejection, and then period of isovolumic relaxation. Okay, so it's just reinforcing the cardiac cycle. Same with the cardiac cycle. Okay, then we're done with the hard part. That's just the hard part of this topic. The rest are easy now. Okay, so the rest are, you can read in your book, easy one. The concepts of preload and afterload. So when we say preload, it's the degree of tension on the muscle before it contracts, when it begins to contract. Because remember, the heart is a muscle. Like the skeletal muscle also has preload. The load you put on the muscle before it contracts. For example, if you're lifting weights, the load you put, the weights you put, that's a preload. The tension before you contract. Okay? Preload. Afterload is the load against which the muscle exerts its contractile force. So that's, for example, if you have the left ventricle that has to contract against the pressure of the aorta, if the pressure of the aorta is great, or the pressure of the systemic arteries is great, such as what happens in hypertension, you have hypertensive, someone who is hypertensive, increased pressure in the systemic circulation, also in the aorta, the ventricles has to counteract that afterload. We call that afterload. The load against which it has to contract. That's why if this ventricular muscle has to contract against a high pressure in the systemic circulation in hypertension, this ventricular muscle would, what's the normal point of muscle if it's overworked? It's used hypertrophy. Okay, hypertrophied. So that's why you see in some hypertensive patients, the ventricles are enlarged, hypertrophied. Left ventricular hypertrophy as an effect of hypertension. This is because it has to contract against that afterload that is increased. Okay, that's afterload. Preload is the pressure before it begins to contract, the tension in the ventricles. So this also is evident in, for example, if you have a patient who is a stab wound patient, ginunggab, lots of blood volume lost. So there's less blood volume in his body, less volume going into the right atrium through the inferior and superior vena cava. So left, we call that venous return, VR. So if there's less volume of blood into the left ventricle or right side of the heart into the left ventricle, there is less preload. Okay, less load, less tension before it contracts. Okay? Okay? It's okay. And it is one of the regulators of how hard our heart pumps or how fast our heart pumps. Okay? Okay? What regulates heart pumping? There's two. Number one, it's the intrinsic cardiac regulation of pumping in response to changes in volume of blood flowing to the heart. We call that earlier as the preload. Okay? So this regulates heart pumping. If there's less amount of blood flowing in, what would you expect of the heart pumping? Decreased pulse. Okay? And then number two, the control of heart rate and strength of heart pumping by the ANS. ANS, we will discuss more of that in the nervous system. Let's go first to the first regulator of heart pumping. We have this term, Frank Starling mechanism, in honor of the physiologist who described this first a century ago. So it's the intrinsic ability of the heart to adapt to increasing volumes of inflowing blood. The greater the heart muscle is stretched during filling, the greater is the force of contraction, and the greater the quantity of blood pumped into the aorta. So our heart has this ability that if you give it much, it will also give out much. If you give it less, then gamay ra ba niya ihatag, it will give out less. Okay, so that's what we call the Frank-Starling mechanism. Within physiologic limits, the heart pumps all the blood that returns to it by way of the heart. Not really all, but 60% of it. Diba, it's only ejection fraction man. Okay, so within physiologic limits, what goes in through the venous return will be pumped out. If there's less venous return, there's also less blood going out. This is exemplified by these curves. I'm going to discuss this and this curve. Okay, so if there's these are the two ventricles. If there's the normal atrial pressure is 0, but at 4 mm right atrial pressure of 4 mmHg, okay, then at the normal right atrial pressure of 0 mmHg, the cardiac output is 5. This is the normal. But if you increase the pressure, if there's more blood flowing into the right atrium, so that it increases pressure to 4 mmHg, then more would be the cardiac output. There would be an increase in cardiac output. Okay, so that's the Frank-Starling law of the heart, Frank-Starling mechanism. And then, lastly, the strength and heart rate, strength of contraction and heart rate is also regulated by the ANS. So what are the components of the ANS, Kenneth? There are two divisions, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Which one's what's the action of the sympathetic? Fight or flight. So if you are in a flight mode or fight mode, what would we expect of the heart contractility? Increased contractility. What would we expect of the heart rate? Increase. So very easy to remember. If it's a rest digest mode or parasympathetic, decreased contractility, decreased heart rate. Okay, so that's what we need to know at this point then. Okay, so we have these terms also to use when we say increased contractility, increased heart rate. We say chronotropic when we say heart rate. So when we say increased chronotropy of the heart, that means increased heart rate. Okay? When we say dromotropic, it's the changes in the conduction velocity primarily in the AV node. The movement from the SA node going to the AV node. So if it's increased dromotropic, increased movement from the SA to the AV node, meaning increasing masdugay, delayed conduction. Okay, increased PR interval. This one, inotropic, is the contractility. When we say inotropic drugs, we have drugs that increase heart contraction. Okay, so when you see these terms, inotropic effects, increased contractility. That's different from chronotropic. Chronotropic is increased heart rate. Contraction is the force of contraction with each heartbeat. Okay? Inotropic, chronotropic, dromotropic. And as I said, the sympathetic, what's the effect of sympathetic? Increased heart rate, increased chronotropy, increased contractility. How about dromotropic effects? Decreased because it increases the conduction velocity. Okay, if increased conduction velocity, increased dromotropic effects. Oh, increased dromotropic effects for the example. Increased movement from the SA node going to the AV node. Okay, so as seen also in this graph, if you have a normal heart, no sympathetic stimulation, okay, at the right atrial pressure of 0, the cardiac output is 5. Okay, if the right atrial pressure increases, then it goes up to as high as 12, for example. But if you have sympathetic stimulation, even with a 0 right atrial pressure, okay, the cardiac output increases to 10. Maximum sympathetic stimulation, even if at a 0 right atrial pressure, cardiac output could go as high as to 20. Okay? So even if without increase in venous return or Frank-Starling law of the heart, basta nice sympathetic stimulation, cardiac output would increase. Okay? So the opposite is true for parasympathetic stimulation. Okay, so those are the two regulators of heart pumping. Intrinsic cardiac regulation, we have the preload or the Frank-Starling law of the heart, and then the ANS, which also regulates. Doesn't mean that it regulates lang the heart pumping. The heart is pumping na because it can spontaneously generate impulses. But what regulates the force of contraction and the heart rate, how fast it pumps, it's this, okay, ANS. Okay, last for this topic, how about ions? As you've said, we have ions that help with the contraction, that are important in action potential and help in contraction of muscle. We have, for example, potassium ions. If there's an excess of potassium ions, we call hyperkalemia. Kalemia is potassium, hyper is increased, emia is blood, increased potassium in blood, the heart becomes dilated and flaccid and heart rate slows. Because remember, potassium ions, they're involved in what part of the action potential we discussed earlier? Depolarization, repolarization, okay, for relaxation of the shell. When potassium channels open, it would go out, causing decrease in membrane potential. So heart becomes dilated, flaccid, okay, if it's increased. Large quantities can block conduction of the cardiac impulse from the atria to the ventricles to the AV bundle, and it causes weakness of the heart and abnormal rhythm that can cause death. Okay, hyperkalemia. We do not want hyperkalemia in our patients. Usually when we see patients with hyperkalemia, we look at the ECG. There are any changes in the rhythm, abnormalities there. Okay. So it's detrimental, it's fatal to a patient, might be fatal. How about calcium? We would learn later on in the excitation contraction technique that calcium plays an important role in contractility of skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle. So if there's increased calcium, heart goes into spastic contraction. Calcium is needed for contraction. If there's a lot, magsige contract, spastic contraction, like that. Okay, a direct effect of calcium ions initiate the cardiac contractile process. But if also there's a weak deficiency, there's weakness with the cardiac muscle. What about temperature? Very self-explanatory. Increased temperature, decreased heart rate, decreased temperature, decreased heart rate. Okay? So that ends our first topic. The second topic is very easy. The one was hard because of the cardiac cycle, the moving pressure curve, but the rest are very easy now. So let's just take a look at these cardiac cycle animation.
pressure within the atria to increase, forcing blood into the ventricles. Atrial contraction, however, only accounts for a fraction of ventricular filling, because at this point, the ventricles are already almost full due to passive blood flow down the ventricles through the open AV valves. As atrial contraction completes, atrial pressure begins to fall, reversing the pressure gradient across the AV valves, causing them to close. The closing of the AV valves produces the first heart sound, S1, and marks the beginning of systole. At this point, ventricular depolarization, represented by the QRS complex, is halfway through, and the ventricles start to contract, rapidly building up pressures inside the ventricles. For a moment, however, the 7 lunar valves remain closed, and the ventricles contract within closed space. This phase is referred to as isovolumetric contraction because no blood is ejected and ventricular volume is unchanged. Ventricular ejection starts when ventricular pressures exceed the pressures within the aorta and pulmonary artery. The aortic and pulmonic valves open and blood is ejected out of the ventricles. This is the rapid ejection phase. As ventricular repolarization, reflected by the T wave, begins, ventricular pressure starts to fall and the force of ejection is reduced. When ventricular pressures drop below aortic and pulmonary pressures, the 7 lunar valves close, marking the end of systole and beginning of diastole. Closure of 7 lunar valves produces the second heart sound, S2. The first part of diastole is, again, isovolumetric, as the ventricles relax with all valves closed. Ventricular pressure drops rapidly, but their volumes remain unchanged. Meanwhile, the atria are being filled with blood and atrial pressures rise slowly. Ventricular filling starts when ventricular pressures drop below atrial pressures, causing the AV valve to open, allowing blood to flow down the ventricles passively. The atria contract to finish the filling phase, and the cycle repeats itself.
Okay, so that's the summary of what.
Thank you for watching. Please feel free to see.
Sure. So, that ends the first topic. I'll give you 5 minutes to as a break. Then we'll continue with the second topic, which is a very short topic. Okay.